I expect there'll be a little chaos. This is a scam, though. I mean, to explain to people that somehow Congress can overthrow the certified results of every state, that we can change an election outcome when there was not a single court case that had any legs. I mean, even if you believe that somehow the courts were, inept in this whole process, if somehow you believe that this whole election was stolen, the reality is there is no impetus to overthrow an election even if you want to, and there's no ability to overthrow an election even if you want to. And so all that's being done is certain members of Congress, the president, et cetera, and like quote-unquote thought leaders on Twitter are getting retweets, they're getting followers, they're raising money on this scam. It is a scam. It is going to disappoint the people that believe this election was stolen, that think this is an opportunity to change it. But instead of being disappointed in the people that led them on this grifting scam, they're going to somehow, try to convince these people that it was, I don't know, what's the new word, the rhinos in Congress or something like that, and not the Constitution that prevents this from happening in the first place. We talk about the Constitution, we have to follow it, and I'm sorry if that doesn't mean that the outcome was what you wanted.
But since you make that point, I mean, some of your friends on the right don't seem particularly perturbed about some of the extreme measures being talked about. The president hasn't embraced them, but he is still, as you say, tweeting and talking about a rigged election, calling Joe Biden a fake president yesterday. Can you imagine the conservative reaction if Barack Obama in 2012 lost the Electoral College and was having meetings talking about, rerunning, using the military, for example, to rerun the election in certain states?
You're correct. Absolutely. And I'm not sure if they're going to be my friends. I know that it's having an impact on Fox. It's having an impact on Republicans in the House and the Senate. It feels like this president's trying to do as much damage as he can, not just to Mitch McConnell, but the Republicans in the House and in the Senate. And the press is glad to go along because it'll help in that final race of 2020 in Georgia. And I'm afraid, and I believe, that those two Republicans may well lose on the 5th of January because of what the president is doing right now. The media is helping him, and this should not be happening. That election should be waged separately from the ugliness that's happening here in Washington.
I'm concerned to an extent about January 6th because if you convince people that, Congress can change a legitimate election and everything was stolen and there's a deep state slash QAnon theory driving this, which is that it's Satanist pedophiles that run the government, you could see people being driven to violence. So I'm concerned about that. In terms of anything else, look, the guardrails of the Constitution are there. In terms of martial law in the military, for instance, which has been discussed, the Pentagon and the military wouldn't implement that. As a lieutenant colonel in the military, I know that I can't follow through on an illegal order, even if it comes from the president. So I'm not concerned to that level. But the concern I have right now, and why I've been so outspoken, is I grew up as a Republican because I believe in smaller government and strong national defense, and that's being destroyed by conspiracies right now and anger, and I really do worry about the future of my party.
Well,
welcome. We're live from the nation's capital, that nation being the United States of the Federal Reserve. You're in the war room. It is, what is it today? It's the 28th
of December.
It's Monday, the 28th of December, the year of our Lord 2020. Glad I know where I am and what I am. Okay.
It's also, by the way, the 955th year anniversary of the consecration of Westminster Abbey today.
900. Wow. Well, let's get to that later. It's also the Feast of the Innocents. This is when the Herod ordered the slaughter of all the children in the hunt for the birth of the baby Jesus. This was before the flight into Egypt. We'll get into all that. Boy, the specials we had one extraordinary individual, Rabbi Sparrow, who really walked through Hanukkah, the Maccabees, or we call them now the Maccabees. We're all Maccabees, right? It's extraordinary. The American Judeo-Christian tradition, the ethos. We're going to get more into that today and throughout the week. And the question we have, by the way, number one political podcast in America, I think, I don't know, 8-9 days in a row. Who's counting? John Fredericks Radio Network, Real America's Voice, Dish Channel 219, Comcast Channel 113, also on Pluto, Roku, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere. Remember, when we're the number one podcast, see the guys in back of us, right? It's less than 20% of our audience. We're really a television show that we also do a podcast later today, or kind of combine this into a podcast. So I want to thank everybody listening to us on podcasts, everybody watching us on TV right now, and particularly G News and GTV that subtitle this in Mandarin and blow it out through the entire world for the diaspora of the Chinese people. Heard a lot in President Trump. A lot to get to. We're going to get to the non-veto, what happened on the COVID bill, what happened on this on the appropriations bill. Get into a lot later, but we got to start with, because we're in countdown mode to January 6th. We want to bring in Boris Epshteyn, kind of Rudy's deputy on this entire operation. And Boris, I got the question just off the bat that people want to have answered, because now with the non-veto and they're meeting here later today, Congress is coming back in. The House meets this afternoon to override the president's veto on the NDAA. That's the National Defense Authorization Act. That is the $60 billion defense bill, right? That America first. We're still paying for the world's. We're still paying for the world's defense. We're still, our kids are over there serving. We're still paying for it. President Trump has vetoed that on a couple of specifics we're going to get into later. But I want to go to, was it Kinzinger and Luntz? Boris, is this a grifting scam? Is all this fight just, people out there raising money off this? The Trump campaigns continue to raise money. Is this real? Are these numbers real? He doesn't seem like he knows the math. I don't know if anybody's explained it to him, if Peter Navarro's had a conversation with the congressman or Frank Luntz. But is this a scam? Is this just a total waste of time and a way to go out with a bang instead of a whimper? Or is this real? Is this truly where an election was stolen and we're fighting for something greater? And President Trump he says it all the time, something greater than himself, something greater than his presidency. You're fighting for this constitutional republic and you're fighting for the Constitution, right? Is this real or is it fake?
It is absolutely real. It is 100% real. Great to be with you, Steve. Hope everyone had a great Christmas. We worked all the way through Christmas. As you know, you and me were talking almost every day, many times, 10 times a day. And I've been on the phone with them now, including throughout this morning. So here's what I'll tell you. This fight is absolutely real. This fight is absolutely righteous. We are continuing to push forward on the legal front. We're continuing to push forward on the legislative front. And now we're pushing toward that date of January 6th, which, as we've talked about consistently, does have significance. Now, in terms of what Frank Luntz had to say, the same Frank Luntz was sitting and treating emails to Hunter Biden, which we have now seen. In terms of what Adam Kinzinger, the Never Trumper, has to say, that's their opinions. And as Americans and as persons in public view or elected officials, in the case of the congressman, they're entitled to it. But what I'm entitled to is knowing the fact that there's 221,000 illegal votes that were cast in Wisconsin. Over 400,000 illegal votes cast in Georgia. 700,000 mail-in ballots cast that were not even observed in Pennsylvania. In Michigan, 71% of absentee precincts unbalanced in Wayne County. As you go state by state by state, Arizona, dead people voting, illegal immigrants voting, again, lack of observation. As you go state by state by state, this is not some conspiracy. And of course, people who are against the president and in their hearts have likely been always against the president. That's what they want to derive this as. Oh, it's some crazy QAnon conspiracy. That's not what this is. I am not a part of QAnon.
Okay,
it has nothing to do with it whatsoever.
Okay, hang over. Hang
a true fight for election integrity.
Okay, hang on for a second, because today, one of the big things we're going to get into the show, the House is coming back today, and they think they got the votes to override the president's veto on the NDAA. Do you believe that your team has done a good enough job of briefing people like the House, like the congressman who goes off on CNN and MSNBC nonstop, about what a scam this is and how you guys are just a group of grifters. Do you think that that between Navarro, yourself, the rest of this team working on this, Jason Miller, the people still remaining at the campaign that are working on this, do you believe? Because we're going to get into the details of this. I want people. We have to reiterate the verticals of where these votes are actually coming from and why they are illegitimate, illegal, and no chain of title, no chain of custody. But do you believe that you and Rudy and Navarro and the rest of the team, Catherine Freese and the rest of these great killers you got working over there, do you think you've done a good enough job of briefing the House? And have House Republicans like McCarthy, have they reached out and said, hey, I want my staff fully briefed. I want to make sure I understand all of this.
Well, let's look at it this way. You've got Mo Brooks and a group of Republicans in the House who have the information and know the information and are paying attention to the information. The point is not that Congressman Kinzinger doesn't have it. It's the point is he doesn't want to know it. He doesn't want to see it. Of course it's there. He's seen the Navarro report, which is extremely
okay. Hang on, hold on for a second. Whoa, hang on, because this is we're within 10 days of game day, right? This is so. Are you saying right now you and Rudy would volunteer and open to go brief the Congressman Kinzinger, and you would be open to brief him and his staff, and guarantee him that he will flip and be a Mo Brooks supporter at the end of that when you go through the details of this?
Well, I would guarantee everything but one thing. I would guarantee that we would go brief him, we'll go through it. Whether he would flip or not is his own political calculation. So I can't make guarantees about that. He'll have to make his own decisions. But I will guarantee that he will see the facts, if he wants to see them, that he should have already seen, that prove him wrong. But those facts may deprive him of his next CNN hit. So he may not want to see them. Because let's be honest, this is what it's all about. This is just people's political calculations and them wanting to be famous and to jump on the train opposing Donald Trump. Now, again, I believe that most of these people were always never Trumpers. Did you ever really think Frank Luntz was a supporter of the president? Come on. Same thing with Kinzinger.
Okay.
These are people in the Justin Amash category. And how's Justin Amash's political career going? Not that great, huh?
A former congressman. Okay, Boris, real quickly, you're going to stay over for the next segment because I want to get into the receipts. Give us your social media so people can start following you right now, and then we're going to cut to a commercial break. How do people get to you?
100%. On the gram, Boris_Epshteyn on Instagram, on Twitter @BorisCP, on Parler @Boris. Can't wait for the next segment.
Yeah, you have to make sure if you want to know what's going on, you got to get in touch with both Rudy's social media and Boris's social media. Okay, we're going to take a break. In fact, we're going to do some producing right here on thing. I want to make sure we pull the email of Luntz and Hunter Biden. You already got that? Okay,
I'll
fine.
pull it up.
You got okay. Here's the reality: we're in the middle of a fight for this country, right? And it behooves us to actually play by the rules. And here's the reason. We just won a massive election. It's no need, we don't have to revert to outside the line tactics because we can win this. We can close this just by pressing the matter. Now, we have a lot of recalcitrant politicians who don't want to stand up. That'll be our topic in the next segment with Boris Epshteyn. Back in a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, breaking news. I think Rudy's down actually in Mar-a-Lago. He's briefing the president. There's talk about Rudy may have a press conference today or may come forward and start to walk through some of the details leading up to the 6th, also what's happening in Georgia. Obviously, a huge development yesterday on the non-veto of signing of this COVID bill and putting forward what the defense, what's the act of the Impoundment Act?
The Impoundment
Control Act that Raheem Kassam was the first guy to bring to light, I think, during the impeachment. We're getting to all of that momentarily. But I want to go back to Boris Epshteyn. Boris, people are obviously very edgy this morning. They really want to know what's going on and what the details are, because I think most of the Trump followers and most of the Trump base are absolutely stunned by the signing of the COVID bill. The president's biggest supporters are saying, they're going, hey, we want to see $2,000 in cash. Everybody support the president on that, but it's got to come with concomitant cuts of this fiasco, both the appropriations bill and the COVID-19 bill. Now, the House is going to meet this afternoon and talk about voting to support the $2,000 per citizen, right, per American citizen. He's been committed to. The Senate's going to do it. Here's the problem. The difference, just simple math. Right now, assuming 300 million Americans would get checks, and maybe that's right or wrong, but it gives you something to put a hook into. With the $600, I think it's $180 billion of the $900 billion. With $2,000, it's $600 billion, and that gap, is what, $400 billion, $500 billion. Those have to. The purpose of why he was going to veto is to get those cuts. Now, the Control Act doesn't actually give you cuts. You can make recommendations, a red line, but Nancy Pelosi controls the House. They're going to be rejected immediately, and the House told you they're going to be rejected immediately. And in fact, McConnell and Perdue and anybody that came out and praised the president, one thing's missing. They didn't say anything about the Budget Control Act. They didn't say anything about cuts, because there's not going to be cuts. And whoever told the president that is just, I think, giving him the wrong information. You can make a symbolic optics, but we're beyond symbolism, particularly if you want to get the $2,000. I think, many of us support the getting more cash to the American people. The other thing I want to talk about later is the absolute, this is just another bridging event to March. This is get you, the appropriations bill supposedly gets you to September, the end of the fiscal year. But the COVID relief bill just gets when it looks like you're going to have to do another one, because the economy's not going to be opened up by then. If you look at what's happening in New York City, if you look at what Biden's talking about, if you look at what our dear friend Tony Move the Goalpost Fauci's talking about, right? It's only another bridging event. So, Boris, people are very anxious. People are kind of not feeling, because they thought they saw a plan. Veto the bill, put the establishment and the globalists against the wall, make them, force them to come back with real cuts, trade off that to get the American people more cash, and then crush it into, force Perdue and Lofter to step up and back you in Georgia, right? Then then win Georgia, because you got all the deplorables there, and then roll into D.C. next week with a massive following that's on fire and saying, hey, we know we can take on the establishment. We know we can back off the globalists, because we actually are the backbone of this party, and we've won an overwhelming, sweeping victory on November 3rd in state legislatures and really in the House and in the Senate. So to combat that, where do we actually stand on court cases and with really getting state legislatures to focus on this? Because I think a lot of people, given that the veto didn't go like they thought it was going to go, are now more anxious than ever. Do you have the receipts? And do you have a venue that's actually going to hear you out to actually look at the receipts in some sort of official, venue?
Well, Steve, here's what I would say. I would urge folks to look at the issues separately. Reasonable people will disagree on the bill signed yesterday, and now, as you said, the House is meeting on $2,000 per person. Then it'll go to the Senate. And the president is going to be sending along that red line that he talked about in terms of the rescissions. So that is on the spending. And I happen to agree with you in terms of March. It looks like the COVID bill is a bridge until March or April. But the hope is, because of President's historic Operation Warp Speed with the vaccine being in place and being administered as we speak, that the economy will start opening up in February, March, and maybe the next bill, and maybe this is wishful thinking, will not be of the size that this one is. And if it is of that size, it should absolutely only focus on American businesses and the American people, full stop. In terms of where we are in the courts and on this fight, the fight absolutely continues across the states. In Georgia, the state lawsuit continues, and we're now looking at options to ensure that we are heard in Georgia, legal options. As I always say, I never want to get ahead of the president, never want to get ahead of legal filings. But let me tell you, listeners and your viewers, the MAGA brain trust, that every option is being exhausted to ensure we get a hearing in Georgia. In Pennsylvania.
Hang on.
Caught me around the curb again.
Yeah, you can't. Let's go back. When you say legal options, what are you going to add to these suits that are going to get you standing or get you heard right now in Georgia? And what's the status? What's the status of a special session sometime this week or Monday of next week? What is the status of a special session?
What you could do on the court side is, if the state courts are not moving, you can make filings and you can file petitions that will use the Constitution and the rights enumerated in the Constitution to ensure that a hearing is had. Again, don't want to get ahead of actual activity, don't want to get ahead of the president, but want to make sure that people are convinced and confident that we are fighting for every inch in Georgia in terms of the special.
I don't think, by the way, I don't think the debate. Hang on. I don't think the debate is at all. People don't think that you and Rudy are fighting. These guys worked every second over the holiday weekend. I mean, Rudy's been down in Palm Beach. He's been nonstop working. The team's been working. Bernie Carrick, Catherine Friess, Boris, your entire team. I could name dozens and dozens of people in individual states. I don't think the question now is, are you fighting? There's a team that is fighting, and you're doing court filings, you're doing further analysis on the receipts but the question is there any way to, and maybe we talk about the Supreme Court under Eastman, this great thing in Pennsylvania, because it just what I'm hearing from sources that maybe not totally dialed into the chambers over at the Supreme Court, and people should understand they're making these stories up, they're yelling at each other. I think they're all doing it remote, right, or mainly remote. We're quite close to the Supreme Court, and I think they're
right.
It's remote. So I don't think they're using curse words at each other that people are hearing in conference rooms. I think that's good. But listen, they haven't stepped forward quickly and given you expedited hearing, which you think would have happened Wednesday or Thursday last week. That is leading people that follow this closely to believe that they're working on some sort of, and maybe arguing internally, but working on some sort of definitive brief or opinion that comes back and essentially shuts this whole thing down at the Supreme Court, cuts you off at the federal court level and says, hey, states run their own elections. There's 50 states, 50 elections. Have at it, guys. Hope that works out for you in Pennsylvania. What say you, Mr. Boris Epshteyn?
They would have to overturn significant precedent in Bush v. Gore. And by doing that, they would actually be saying that the Electoral Count Act is effectively unconstitutional because it is a federal act which applies to the way presidential elections are run. So, very tough to speculate, and I'm not in the speculative business about what the court is doing. Were we hoping for a ruling on the motion for Christmas? Only if it were the right decision. If the extra several days mean that we may get the motion to expedite granted, of course that's a benefit. And also, the court can only look at what's in front of it. That's why right now they're only able to look at the Pennsylvania case. If we choose to bring the Georgia case up to the Supreme Court, which we have the ability to do under the Constitution, then they would have to look at the Georgia case. If we look at Wisconsin and the ridiculous decision there by the state Supreme Court that was razor thin, 4-3, on those over 200,000 unlawful votes in Wisconsin, then the Supreme Court would look at that. The Supreme Court does not and is not able to look at issues that are not in front of it. So the speculation of a broad ruling where they take everything and anything related to the election, I disagree with it, because that is not how the Supreme Court operates. That's part of my background in constitutional law. I'll tell you that, and studied this extensively at Georgetown, that this is not the way the court conducts its business. They have to look at cases that are in front of it. That goes back to Marbury v. Madison under Marshall. So that's where we stand. Pennsylvania, that case, I do feel confident we'll hear back on the motion to expedite shortly. I think it's a strong case. It's a robust case. It's probably our strongest filing. Well, it's actually the first direct filing by President Trump and his campaign in front of the Supreme Court. But it's probably the strongest of the cases that's been in front of the high court. Georgia would continue to battle. Wisconsin, there's a ton of movement on the legal front in Wisconsin, both in the federal court, on the federal court case.
Boris, can we have you hang over just for a few minutes in the next section? I know you're pressed for time, but just in 30 seconds we got in this segment, of the 200,000 plus I see, and definitely can find that you're challenging, because normally it's 15 to 20,000. You're saying it's 180 to 200,000 over. Of those, you've been working on that for 10 days. Just a guesstimate. Where do you think we stand on being able to prove that those votes were illegal? Is it 25,000? Is it 50,000? Is it 100,000? Is it 150,000? Just a range.
In terms of the, and definitely confined, 208,000 and definitely confined votes in Wisconsin. I believe that we are at about 25 to 30% falsification rate on those, which is about 50,000, which is way above the 20,000 difference in Wisconsin.
Okay, hang on for a second. We're going to take a short commercial break. Boris Epshteyn, Rudy's deputy on all the legal front and all this investigation, is going to join us. We're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to return on War Room Pandemic in just a moment.
Everything's begun, and you are over, 'cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, welcome back to the War Room, the place where you get the signal, not the noise. And the question is right now, is this noise or is it signal? Or is this moving? Is this going to actually change things? I mean, it's pretty evident when you look at the evidence in the verticals of just good old-fashioned illegal voting. The second vertical, which is hundreds of thousands in these states. The second, which is this mail-in ballots. Just leave the constitutionality aside. I'm talking about the chain of custody of these ballots, the complete fraud that much of this voting was. And then you look at the third, which I've always said is kind of a longer-term investigation, and that is on Dominion Systems and Smartmatic, to find out what the real facts are, and to have real professionals go through it in detail, because that's quite a complicated topic. As I brother the other conservative outlets having to walk back and put up the very embarrassing disclaimer now from Smartmatic, their little advertisement, can attest to. I want to go back to Boris. So, Boris, here's the question. Is not whether you have the evidence, but it's right now we got guys like Gluntz and Kinzinger, which is, I realize they're just a Greek chorus of negativity all the time, right? So I don't want to hold those guys out as anything special, but I want to put that as a kind of Greek chorus. Is there a real path, given the courts have been very hesitant and reticent, and this is why I go back to, just to make sure that we're ahead of this, the Supreme Court. If they were going to give expedited hearing, I think you would have heard something last week to get everybody properly, the briefs ready, lay out a table for the arguments. It's pretty obvious, I think, and look, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but it's pretty obvious to people that watch this closely that Roberts wants no piece of this. He wants no part of this, right? He wants to avoid this. He's been trying to avoid this from the beginning. And you need four justices to step up and say we ought to do this. I believe that there is an intense debate internally at the Supreme Court right now, and I believe that they are actually working on an opinion that's going to come out on your expedited. And I think right now, unless there's something that it just doesn't feel like where the court's going, they're going to shut this process down with an opinion that's going to come out and say, hey, look, sorry, not sorry, we're just not going to get involved in this. And that's going to put it back to where I've said it's got to be at the beginning in the state legislatures and these ones that are controlled by Republicans and have Republican governors. So what is it on process that people are feeling more and more frustrated? I understand you got Cleta Mitchell, you're adding to these lawsuits. We're going to have Phil Klein up at the top of the hour to go through his stuff, his material. But what makes you feel confident with 10 days to go that the courts are even a venue at all, other than just increasing frustration, increasing spending time and resources?
So several things there, Steve. On the courts, we do not know how the Supreme Court is going to come out. You're right. There's, of course, a chance the Supreme Court comes out and says that on this specific issue, because, again, they only rule on what is in front of them, that they are not going to grant the motion to expedite, and they turn down cert, which means that we did not get 4 justices after the president appointed 3 of them. We didn't get 4 justices to take up this very vital issue of the Article 2 failures of this election, which means that clerks, secretaries of state, governors, courts took away the rights of state legislatures to handle presidential elections. So if we don't get those, I want to tell your viewers, tell your listeners, that is not the end of the day for us. If the Supreme Court says, you know what, not my circus, not my monkey. If that's the case, we continue to press on the legislatures, and then remember the constitutional process. Under under the 12th Amendment, on January 6th, which is a date actually set by the Electoral Count Act, but under the 12th Amendment, the Vice President, as President of the Senate, conducts the joint session, presides over the joint session of Congress, which is where electoral votes are opened and they are counted. Okay? Again, remember, and so vital for your viewers and your listeners to remember, that the Trump electors were sent on December 14th, 2 weeks ago today. The Trump electors were sent from these key states of Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona. The Trump electors were sent. So the process going into Congress is one of making sure electors are sent and making sure that all the voter fraud, all the election irregularities, all the election fraud are exposed and uncovered. And that's what we're done. That's what we're doing. Do we want a joint session in Georgia? Absolutely. Should Governor Brian Kemp call it? 100%. Should Senator David Perdue and Senator Kelly Loeffler call on Kemp to mandate a special session? Yes, they should if they want to win those races next week. But is that a prerequisite to correct action in Congress? It is not. Is that a prerequisite to the correct electors being counted based on the most legal votes? It is not. Do we now have numbers out of Wisconsin on the unlawful indefinitely confined classifications? Yes, we do, and it's at about 20, 25, 30% of 208,000. And we know it grew from 2016 to today, and now we know why it grew, because Democrats were using that indefinitely confined classification in Wisconsin to push false ballots, to push voter fraud, election fraud. So that's where we stand. We continue battling on all these fronts because we know that we want to make sure that if one of them doesn't work, we continue to battle on the others.
I want to go, just one last question, but I want to tee it up first. In Axios today that reported the inside baseball of how the president came not to veto because of McCarthy and Mnuchin and others, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it also had another very important article I think we got to put up and push out. It talked about 5 trends in 2021. And remember, Axios, for our audience, Axios is kind of the cheat sheet for the conventional wisdom, the inside baseball, the gossip, the whispering, campaigns, all that. But Jonathan Swan, these guys, and Mike Allen do a good job of presenting kind of what's going on in the background. Jonathan Swan, who I think is one of the smartest young reporters out there, right? I don't agree with his political philosophy, but he's a killer. He says in his trends, he actually takes Biden and says, look, this guy's on a lonely island right now with very little kind of backup. And what he's implying and kind of stating in so much is that the case has been made so overwhelmingly, even with the oligarch suppression in Silicon Valley and the media suppression of this, calling it baseless, no evidence. This is Trump's fantasy. He's guilty of sedition. That anybody's talking about this is guilty of sedition. That he even admits that Biden's been backed into a corner because of this, of the illegitimacy and the illegality. And yes, YouTube, I understand the eighth, the safe harbor, and I understand also the Electoral College. But that's not actually the point. The point is that's like the Warren Commission, and now we're into with the House investigation 14 years later where they reversed that. This is the reality. But is the thinking of you and Rudy and the team that you actually can get to the 6 and have a fully vetted and actually Pence can have the details if somewhere along that way, whether Wisconsin with the ICs, whether Arizona with the illegal voting, or the Maricopa County subpoena that hasn't, they're fighting about being enforced, or Georgia with both the illegal votes of 400,000 and the other 600,000 of the mail-in ballots that have no chain of custody, and the Georgia Star continues every day to say, hey, the records aren't even there, they're not even sending them forward. Do you believe that you need at least one of those state legislatures to meet and actually give an official formal venue where Democrats and the media get a shot at your quote unquote evidence? Or do you believe that we can continue down here with court cases, fights, and trying to get that venue, but if it doesn't happen, you just roll into the 6th and it'll happen then?
I believe we have to fight for the venue. I believe we have to call for the venue. I believe we've had a lot of these hearings in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan. I believe we have to put the information out publicly as we've been doing. But I do not believe that a special session in any of the states is a prerequisite to the correct electors being counted or not counted on January 6th and the correct president being inaugurated on January 20th if a decision on which candidate got the most electoral votes is made by then. The Constitution, actually one thing I agree with Congressman Kinzinger on is the Constitution does have guardrails. It has rules. It has processes. Then it's got processes for who counts the electoral votes, got processes for how inauguration works, and what happens if there's not a president who's been selected based on the most electoral votes, which are based on most legal votes. So we are following the Constitution here and not following the hysteria from most of the mainstream media, and frankly, the never Trump Republicans who were never a part of the MAGA agenda to begin with.
Okay, this gets to the point of some of the people that want to color outside the lines. If you've got the Constitution on your side, and I think the frustration, the building frustration of the War Room Pandemic Posse and just the broader Trump movement overall, is that they've listened to you, they've listened to Rudy, they've looked at the details, they've read the Navarro report, the Immaculate Deception. They've gone through Jack Maxey's, the guys over in Switzerland that go through them. They have gone chapter and verse. We've put the information out that said, you need to know the details. You got to read it. They've read everything. They know it chapter and verse. They know the verticals. They know the illegal votes. They know it all. And the question they have is, given that the Constitution is obviously on our side, given the fact that we've got the evidence, how do we not have official formal venue to present this at? And how could we possibly be rolling into Washington, D.C. on the 6th? And I think that builds up the frustration of those voices saying, "Hey, we tried the standard method, and the standard method didn't even get us a venue or a hearing or anything like that. Maybe we try unconventional, right?" And I'm not saying that frustration is justified, but here my point is that if the evidence is so overwhelming from the Trump basis perspective, why can't we even get even the hatred they have of Trump just to keep the system so it survives? Why can't you get a venue?
Well, Steve, let me say this to those who are deeply frustrated. We do have to stay within the larger, broader system of government, right? And Americans vote. Americans talk with our votes. So if you don't like what Brian Kemp has been doing in Georgia, well, you have an opportunity to either recall him or you have an opportunity to vote against in the future. Same with Ducey. Same with any Republican legislators, any Republican governors. We as Americans, we speak with our votes. And right now, it is absolutely the duty of Americans to make it clear, peacefully clear, to their elected officials in Georgia, in Arizona, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Nevada, in Pennsylvania, that they want their elected officials to conduct these special hearings, special sessions,
last thing,
the right electors are chosen.
Last thing, you've got 30 seconds. I think the response from the posse would be, we did. We spoke with our votes. We just won an overwhelming victory across the board in state legislatures, in the House, in the Senate, with the mainstream media against us, everybody against us. We won an overwhelming victory, and here we are on the 28th of December. And Boris, who we love, I don't have Boris in front of the Georgia Assembly discussing it. We did win an overwhelming vote. We did follow your instructions. We did go out and vote. We knocked on doors. We gave Trump $50 that we didn't have. We did all that. In 30 seconds, what are those people supposed to do?
What they're supposed to do is make it clear to the elected officials who they are not satisfied with, that if they do not change and change quickly, those votes are going away or going to somebody else. That's all you could do. And you're right. The people have supported us, but most of all, let's be honest, they've been supporting President Trump, and that's why those crowds are chanting "Fight for Trump." And if the elected officials are not doing the right thing by the president and the Constitution, They should hear
Okay.
about it, and that there should be action in terms of the next voting.
Boris, we got to bounce. You're a mensch. We're going to get your social media up again afterwards. Keep fighting, and we're going to take a short commercial break. Boris Epshteyn of the campaign, he's got to go back to work and take a short commercial break. You're going to have the War Room posse in an open discussion, debate, maybe even a fight in the War Room. When we return on War and Pandemic.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Here's the reality in Georgia. And by the way, I think Boris did as good a job as possible under that grilling, and they're grounded away. I want to hear your guys' counter arguments to that. Here's the reality. You know what's going on in Georgia? Let me tell you what's going on in Georgia. The business community. Remember the fight they had over the Confederate flag? They had a portion of the Confederate flag in Georgia. I think it was 10 years ago or so. The business community, Coca-Cola, all these guys said, hey, we're moving out. The business community has put – the reason Kemp is in hiding, the reason you're not having the Ralston and these guys, let me just tell you what the reason is. The business community said, hey, if you fight, if you do this, if you put this up as a venue, if you go to decertify the Biden vote, we're out. Okay, we're out. Atlanta becoming an international hub right now because ever since they had the Olympics, right, they think they're a world city, right? They think they're a world city. I come from Richmond, the capital of the Confederacy, and Atlanta for many, many decades has been the leading city in the South, away from Charleston and Savannah and Richmond and Charlotte. But it's become an international city with international businesses, and they've said, hey, let me tell you, you're not going to support this Trump movement. If you support the reversal, the decertification of Biden, of even giving it a venue, right? We're out. That's the real pressure they're under that nobody wants to talk about. That's the reality. That's the pressure. That's if you can't understand why Kemp is not doing it. It's not just his donors. It's also the corporate interest in there. And this is once again the Republican Party. I want to make sure I emphasize this. That people say, oh, Bannon keeps saying the GOP. You got to understand the apparatus and the instrument you've got, which is the GOP. And remember, everybody out there, particularly the ones whining the most, you gave this money. You supported this. All the Austrian School of Economics guys that gave the tax cuts and the deregulation and gave everything to the corporations, which are now by far the most progressive part of this apparatus that is browbeating the populist movement and is virulently anti-populist. You're seeing this in Georgia. In Georgia, Georgia becomes the reality of what we got. And this is why the campaign has overwhelming evidence. The campaign has, and this is why the courts are trying to avoid it, and quite frankly, more importantly than the courts, right? Because they're arguing either don't have standing or it's laches, you should have come earlier, essentially what they're saying, right? But in the state legislatures, they don't want to have the hearings. In Arizona, the business community out there the same way. And in Wisconsin, there's going to be a clarifying moment here shortly, because in Wisconsin, they're coming back with fairly substantial evidence about these ICs, these indefinitely confined. And this is where it was just stolen, right? These are illegal. There's just no question about that. They've got the social media. They can point these guys to their jobs. They can point them to where they're on vacations, et cetera. So this is a defining moment. Now, the next 2 weeks are a defining moment of how we go forward as a country, and what the corporate interests are, the globalist corporate interest, the party of Davos. It's not a conspiracy, ladies and gentlemen, but there's no coincidences, right? This is just the way the system works. This is the way the system works. This is the way the system incentivizes itself to work. Mr. Raheem Kassam.
By perseverance and fortitude, we have the prospect of a glorious issue. By cowardice and submission, that sad choice of a variety of evils. Okay.
Is that you?
That's Thomas Paine. That's not me.
Thomas Paine.
That's almost me.
Give me that one again.
By perseverance and fortitude, we have the prospect of a glorious issue. By cowardice and submission, the sad choice of a variety of evils.
Was that written for our revolution or the French Revolution?
That was written for your
that
sad revolution.
that was from the crisis, right?
That is the end.
Yes,
that is the ending.
Is that the last paragraph? Yeah.
It is. And here's why it's so important. I'm reading War Doom in the live chat right now. I'm not reading War Room. A lot of people have turned into doomers here. Hey, there's no path ahead. You know, we don't see it. We don't get it. We're not following. Hey, guess what? Everybody who has been fighting until this point is still fighting. So nobody has the right to give up right now.
Let me go back. When you say that, stop with the doom. Stop whining. It's time to take the pacifier out. Stop sucking your thumb. Let me go back to Axios for a second. Remember, this is a triage. Number one, it's absolutely to close on an election that was stolen, okay? As importantly, it's also to impress upon the broader American people that this was stolen and Joe Biden's illegal and illegitimate. We're winning that one hands down. Hey, you know, no doubt that sometime today this episode is going to get pulled down, right, or try to be pulled down by the tech oligarchs. In the mainstream media, which continue to say it's baseless and there's no evidence and this is just a scam of grifters, right? You're winning that. Even Jonathan Swan says that. Yes, sir, Jack Maxey.
You know, Raheem read that. It's from The Crisis. Thomas Paine published that in late December of 1776, and we had the whole weekend where we looked back on Americans never giving up, particularly on Christmas Day. There are many historians who believe that was actually read to Washington's troops on the 24th and 25th before they went off to Trenton. It was printed just 20 miles away, and it was written out to them. So, again, people, do not give up. We have history on our side.
Was the crisis also about sunshine soldiers, summer soldiers, and sunshine patriots?
Yes, it was.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, remember, at the Declaration of Independence, love the lawyers that did it, great event in world history. But 60 days after that, as we showed with Patrick K. O'Donnell the other day in the Christmas combat history of Christmas, within 60 days, the British landed, I think, the largest field army they'd ever landed outside of anywhere in India, anywhere in Europe. This is the largest field army they had ever put forward to suppress this, put down this rebellion, right? That army ran the tables until it chased Washington from Long Island through Brooklyn to Manhattan, up to White Plains, down to New Jersey, all the way to cross the Delaware and get to Pennsylvania, where they finally took a stand. They had the crisis written. This was then 6 months, and they rolled the dice on a forced crossing of a river in the middle of the Northeaster to take on a hardened group of mercenaries, the Hessians. Why do I say that? That's our DNA. That's where we come from. So don't give me the gloom and doom, okay? There's sunlit uplands, but you got to fight. Yes, I told you, some days are going to be better than others, right? And this veto was, I think the timing of it was not exactly perfect, or the concept of it. But you got to deal with reality. Okay, we shifted now from taking down the CCP to getting back to King's College Choir in our Christmas. I'm a big believer in the 12 days of Christmas.
No, I think you might have the CCP.
Okay, may have the CCP. Who knows where we're going today? This is another thing. You keep saying, and this thing is the China virus. I dig it. Why don't we have something in here that holds them accountable? Let's go get a couple of $1 trillion to pay the American people. Okay, we're going to have Phil Klein. We're going to have Phil Klein back with us. Phil Klein is going to join us, the great lawyer, to talk about the social media oligarchs next on War and Pandemic.